Hi, everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is my pre-show live stream for episode 10 of House of the Dragon, the finale. We have reached it finally, and I'm really excited. This is going to be a solo live stream. I know that for the last few weeks I've had a variety of guests. I just thought, you know what, I'll do this one myself. I'm quite looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun. And as with all of my live streams through the season, this is a charity live stream. So this is in aid of Alzheimer's care and research. So super chats are switched off, but the donate button is switched on. Alzheimer's is an horrific disease. And this is just a small way that we can help those who are suffering, those who are living with those who are suffering with Alzheimer's, and also get a bit of research done to try and just solve this somehow and hopefully make other people's lives better in the long run. So that's what we've got going on. I've had a few green screen problems just getting set up, so I'm a little bit more shimmery than usual as well. But hopefully that's not too distracting. But the other thing to say is there has been a leak of episode 10, so that is out there. My general rule on these live streams, I know some people were asking in the chat beforehand, book spoilers are fine. In these, show spoilers are not okay. And moderators know that they are fully entitled to shut down absolutely any leaks and spoilers that we have got going on there. And so connected to that, Gabriel Farrell saying, "Hi, Robert, hope you're well. Can you please call the people who have been talking and arguing about the leaked last episode on Twitter the rudest word you feel you can say on your live stream, beginning with C? Clowns?" It's genuinely impacting my interest and enjoyment in the show at this point, and I'm sure others feel the same. So, yeah, it's just if you want to watch the episode early, then I'm sure there are places that you can find. But not on this channel. Let me just have a quick see whether I can change at all with my background. No, it doesn't seem to. I'm stuck being all fuzzy, I'm afraid. So hopefully that's not too distracting. Anyway, let's get into the questions. So we've got a question first of all from George R.R. Tolkien saying, "Salutations, Robert." Salutations to you, sir. "I'm sad we won't be able to see Winterfell this season, but at least we will get to see the Stormlands. And do you think we will get to see Corlys one last time before the season ends? He's one of my favorite characters, and he just disappeared for a good while now." Yes, so in terms of Winterfell, very probably we will see it at some point in the first 2 or 3 episodes of next season. So we are going to go to Winterfell. So in the book, what happens, and I see no reason why they would change this on the show, what happens is Jacaerys gets sent on a mission to gather allies in the north and ends up in Winterfell. There are a lot of really interesting things that potentially happen, but that's not going to happen this season. We've seen in the trailer, we will see Storm's End, so that is very exciting. But in terms of the question about Corlys, now he has been a little bit, I think, here the victim of time compression. Now, this is very different to when we were talking about the Rings of Power. They squashed thousands of years down into just a matter of a few years, which has huge impact, will have increasing impacts actually in later seasons than it did in season 1. But here, what they did, we know about the time jumps, but what they have done is to get each episode with the greatest impact, they sort of squashed a few events together that actually took place a few years apart, and they've squashed them together, which means that Corlys being really quite ill, and that whole incident that we had a couple of episodes ago there with Vaemond and the succession crisis in Driftmark, that happened a little way before the outbreak of war, not just like literally the day before the king died. So Corlys in the book was not at death's door. Now, that means that in the book he was involved in these early what gets called the Black Council. We've had the Green Council already, which was the gathering of the small council when they decided to make Aegon king. The Black Council is the equivalent, which happens over on Dragonstone when they decide, you know what, we're not going to accept this. We're not going to take it sitting down. We will do something about this. So he was there. At least he came across with his fleet and said, "We're on your side." That probably won't happen on the show because he is apparently very, very ill now. Possibly they'll kind of tweak it a little bit so that he might not be in this episode coming, but maybe he's going to be getting better really quite quickly, and so he will appear quite early on in next season. I certainly hope so, because he's quite an important character in what happens, and it does set up the key alliance there on their side is between Rhaenyra and House Velaryon. Now, one of the knock-on effects of this will be Rhaenys is going to be a lot more important, because in the book, what we had was Corlys came in. He's the head of House Velaryon. He's a legend, this guy, and he's there just taking control and directing events for House Velaryon. But here on the show, Rhaenys is going to be effectively leading House Velaryon for this bit anyway. So her position and stance is going to be a lot more important than it was in the book. We've already seen one tweak. I call it a tweak. It was quite a big change when she emerged in the Dragon Pit on Meleys and was there, and could potentially have Dracarys all of Team Green. Didn't. We'll probably come back and talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But she then will be flying to Dragonstone. So almost certainly it will be her who is first to break the news, to say, this is what's going on. I've just come from King's Landing, and this is what's happening. So she is going to be a lot more important, and that probably will play into the Battle of Books Rest, which will, the books again, happened relatively soon after. So we'll have to wait and see, but this is putting a whole lot more emphasis on the role of Rhaenys than Corlys. Just having a quick flick through the chat. Divine Chalaka saying, did you watch episode 10? I did not. No, I'm very happy waiting until, well, it's only, just under 4 hours time now. Caius Ballerina saying Baylor's dress in the background is dope. Yeah, it's really good. Actually, I really like this picture. As a whole, I think that setup is great, and it shows this great alliance between the team Rhaenyra and the Velaryons. Just quick flicking through the chat. Mattia saying excited for the final episode. Fifas saying, do you think Blood and Cheese will make an appearance or hold off until season 2? I'm really curious how this will end. I will talk about the ending of this, but Blood and Cheese, I think pretty clearly in my mind, will be episode 1 of the next season. We haven't got any inside information on this other than the fact that if you could think of the most dramatic way, this is going to be a break before the next season, and we should probably be relatively open. They haven't started filming this. We've heard they've booked in filming in Spain, I think, in March and April of next year. Presumably they will have done a little bit of production before that, but we've not heard of anything of them going into pre-production. They're writing, but no filming yet. So it took them 10 months to film season 1, and then another, I think it was 6 months of post-production. So with the best will in the world, we're looking 18 months from now. So we're looking probably heading towards summer 2024. So it is going to be a long break, and they will need to, or they will want to bring people back with a bit of a bang. They will want to be pulling people back into the story as quickly as possible. And I think Blood and Cheese would be an amazing way to do that, just reminding people quite how impactful this story can be. Philip saying, any idea where season 2 will end? My take on where they're at. George R. R. Martin has said, it's not been officially confirmed. George R. R. Martin has said that he thinks it will be 4 seasons. He thinks it should be 4 seasons to tell the whole story. Given season 1 is the build up to the Dance of the Dragons, that to my mind is probably meaning that season 2 takes us up to the first fall of King's Landing, season 3 takes us up to the second fall of King's Landing, season 4 takes us up to the end of it. So that's my rough take on where they're going to be going with it. They may tweak it, but that's that works in terms of sort of showing the tide of war turning. Season 2, therefore, is when the Greens slowly turn this around from where they are at the start, which is a very very poor situation, it has to be said, that they're quite isolated. They don't have many allies on the mainland, and they managed to turn it around by the end of season 2. So that is the meta arc of season 2, I would say. Let's go to a question from Shashar saying, in an earlier episode, Alicent expresses her fear that Rhaenyra would have Aegon killed for no other reason than that she would see his mere existence as a threat to her claim. Well, she doesn't seem to still believe this after the episode with Viserys' final dinner. Might a reason for it be that Rhaenyra would have found herself forced to have him executed or exiled at the very least, after his transgressions would have gone a bit too far out of hand? She's not one to close her eyes and certainly knows what kind of person her son is. So this is trying to, I mean, I think this is quite a generous interpretation, I have to say, but the idea that Rhaenyra would have to kill Alicent's children was put in Alicent's head by Otto. So Otto is very much here trying to plant the seeds for Alicent early on. This is years beforehand. Plant the seeds with her that she has to protect her children. He will know that is the one thing which is most likely to make her try and push for Aegon to be king rather than Rhaenyra, because she wishes to protect her children. So that's the big reason why. Might she now think that Aegon he might do things so ridiculous if Rhaenyra's queen and he's just this minor princeling, that he would have to be executed for those crimes? I don't think it would ever get that far. He would, if you accept Rhaenyra being queen, then actually Aegon is quite a long way down the line of succession. So you would have, after Rhaenyra, you'd then have all of Rhaenyra's children. So you have, I don't know what we got there, 5 of them by that point. Now, that then places him, and I haven't done all of the succession for this, but that places him, I think, at best 6th in line, which is not that close. So there's actually no reason, if you've accepted the principle that Rhaenyra should be the ruler, he is no longer next in line after that. But he would be a rallying point for people who do not wish to have a queen on the throne. So that's the issue that's there. Might he do something? I mean, he could do some pretty bad things, but a wise monarch would probably more likely exile them than kill them and create a whole load of extra problems for themselves. Because it's one thing to exile somebody, it's completely another if they kill Aegon. Suddenly you've got Aegon's children who would be growing up with a bit of a grudge. So I don't think so. This is one of those psychological projection things from Otto as much as anything else. He, from his perspective, thinks, well, if Aegon is made king, we'll have to kill Rhaenyra because she would always be a threat. And he thinks that the same must be true the other way around, that if Rhaenyra becomes queen, she would obviously have to kill Aegon. I think this says more about Otto's character than it does about the truth of the situation. let's go to a second question from Shar saying, I would also like to propose an alternate view of Aegon's reaction to his own coronation. You seem to interpret his expression as sullen, though he grew to like the adulation of the crowd. I think that what is happening here is an attempt of showing a positive side of him. Aegon is a spoiled boy who is in over his head and has always known that he is in over his head. Despite knowing that and telling his mother that on the ride to the Sept, he does in the end go through with the coronation. I would interpret his expression at this point as he walks down the line of soldiers as progressively tightening up with determination to finally actually eat from the plate that fate has served him. He did resolve to be a good king, now that he can no longer avoid being king at all, which makes what happens all the more tragic. Now, I think this is a very generous interpretation. I think that, well, to take one step back, one thing is very noticeable, which is that the House of the Dragon have tried to soften quite a few of the characters. So the characters that book readers really didn't like, because they seemed to be very, well, evil, bad people. They have a lot of these characters. The show have tried to show a little bit more nuance about or reasons for their actions. For example, Alicent. I don't know anyone who read the book and came out thinking, you know what, that Alicent, I understand why she did what she did. Everybody seemed to come out with the impression that Alicent was just scheming with her father. But now we've got a slightly more nuanced view here. There is a reason why she has launched the coup, which is because she thinks she's in the right. She thinks that Viserys did indeed do a deathbed change of mind and anoint her son king. Now, we may or may not think that that was a fair interpretation of what Viserys says, but that does allow us to understand a little bit more about her character, and also making her childhood friends with Rhaenyra, making her be more in opposition to Otto in how the conflict is handled. This was an oft overlooked point, I think, about that last episode, which was this was an episode about how do the Greens progress with this? How do they actually go about taking the throne away from Rhaenyra? Otto was all for, well, we'll just kill Rhaenyra and Daemon and we'll just make our guy king when we can. Alicent didn't want her Rhaenyra to be killed, and she wanted Aegon to be crowned in a way that everybody could see was completely above board, and every kind of symbol of legitimacy was there. So this was why there was, I did a video on this a couple of days ago, this was why there was that race to find Aegon, because they had different ideas about where to go next, and it was a matter of who managed to capture him. Because he was the king, they could then influence how they went forward from here. So this also places Alicent as being a more nuanced character, because she thinks that her son should be king, and she wants to go about that in a way which, if possible, doesn't have any bloodshed. Otto definitely wants the bloodshed. So they've nuanced a lot of these characters. However, they have not yet nuanced Aegon or Aemond, to be honest. Both of them are set up. I mean, Aegon himself is set up as a spoilt brat and really not a nice character at all. Aemond, I mean, he came out a little bit better, I think, in the first episode that we saw him, but he is still quite a cartoon cutout villain in his looks, if not anything else. So those two characters, I'm waiting to see whether we might get a little bit more sympathy for them at some point, if they're going to do the same kind of thing for them that they have done to other characters to make us go, no, I might not like this character, I might not think this character is right, but I understand where they're coming from. So that's the sort of the context of this. But did they use that coronation to try and show us that Aegon finally was stepping up, that he had decided to be a good king? Well, I think the proof will be what happens next episode. Will he turn out to be a good king in the first real test, which is what do we do now? What terms are we going to be putting to Rhaenyra? How is he going to react to what happens with the battle over Shipbreaker Bray if we see that reaction? And is that going to show him as a king who is wise and magnanimous, or is that going to show him as somebody who is actually just being the same person, but suddenly with a whole lot more power? That's my instinct, is that's where they're going with him. And then later on, maybe next season, they will try and show us a bit more of a human side to him. But I do like that. I mean, I think it's a fair interpretation. Having said it's a generous interpretation, I think it's a fair interpretation to say, yes, what this was Aegon stepping up. We just have not yet seen that is what was happening. Roman Lakovet's just going through the chat quickly. Roman Lakovet saying, why didn't Otto have a better plan for getting rid of Rhaenyra other than sending the Kingsguard to Dragonstone? Doesn't sound like a great plan. Well, interesting. Because I think this is a step up from what was in Fire and Blood. One of the things that I always thought in Fire and Blood was that Team Green there made a few very clever moves to start with, in that they seized and split the treasury. They tried proactively to be getting the support of other houses. They were looking, Otto was actively trying to get the help of people that, like the Triarchy, who he knew hated Daemon. So they seemed to be making a few sensible decisions, but we don't read anywhere that they do what would be the one thing which could guarantee them winning a civil war, which is, while nobody knew that the king was dead, assassinating the Rhaenyra, Daemon, and all of their family. That would be bloodthirsty, but it feels like that's the kind of thing Otto would do. So is this the best plan? No. I mean, I think realistically the best plan would be to pay a stupid amount of money to the Faceless Men and say, just sort this out for us. But is it a plan which might work? Yes. Because if they did not know that the king was dead, and if some Kingsguard appeared on Dragonstone, they could literally just walk up and nobody would stop them. They could walk in the front door. People would just assume that they were there for good and honorable reasons, and then they could get into private chambers and do the dirty deed. So that's, I mean, it's not the best plan, but it is a plan. And as I said, compared to Fire and Blood, that's a huge step up, because they didn't seem to have a plan to do that at all there. Totesrechen Leben Langer saying, I don't think it's actually Aegon stepping up. I think it's Aegon resolving to step up. That's like me resolving to breathe water. The next episode will show that he is not capable of stepping up. Yeah, so again, we'll have to say, I think the proof is what happens next episode, this episode coming up. I think it's open to interpretation what that smile. He did smile. He got the sword. Blackfire held it up. People were cheering, and he smiled. And are we supposed to interpret that as, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be a good king? Or are we supposed to interpret him as going, hey, actually, I like this? My instinct is the latter, but we will find out. Kolnitsky saying Aegon II would have no chance to become a good ruler. Yeah, he doesn't seem to be the person you'd pick immediately. He has to be said. Kobarsos82 saying Aemond is like a copy of Daemon. If he got the throne, he would be equally dangerous, or rather even a lot worse. So yeah, the Aemond and Daemon thing is something that we've mentioned a few times, but it's, I think, quite worth underlying. Their names are quite literally the same. You just moved the D from the beginning to end of the word. so they're the same. They are set up as mirrors of one another. They are the second son, always in the shadow of their older brother, who perhaps we don't think is being most of the time the most natural leader. They're a lot more hot-headed. They're a lot more independent-minded. And you can see Aemond, when Daemon comes and he chops off of the top half of Aemond Velarion's head, you can see Aemond going, "Oh, I like that." Even the dragons that they've got are sort of echoey. They're supposed to be linked in. So we get Vhagar was Aemond's, but before that it was Daemon's wife's dragon, and before that it was Daemon's dad's dragon. So Aemond is picking the dragon that is most, other than Caraxes, most closely linked in with Daemon. So we're supposed to be seeing this link between the two, which is why what happens much later with the Battle Above the God's Eye, that was a sense of inevitability there. That's the way that George R. R. Martin definitely writes it. It's like we had to meet at some point. So now let's just do this. Let's just have this battle between the two of us. So that is where we're supposed to see it. And in the wars that follow after this season, then they will also have similar-ish roles. They will be there roving across the Riverlands at different times, hunting for each other, trying actively to be claiming that land, claiming Harrenhal in particular as this hub, this center point for their side. So they are supposed to be echoes of one another. Quick check through as people in the chat saying, I hope saying, "I've absolutely loved season 1. Can't wait for the finale." Yeah, me too. Sorek saying, in the trailer, Daemon sings to a dragon. Which dragon might that be? That's quite an interesting question. I'm really looking forward to that. So I do wonder, and I've no idea whether this is the case. As I say, I've not seen the show and I've had no leaks myself. So at some point, they will have to do a dragon audit. This probably is going to be season 2, but maybe it's going to be this one. They will do a dragon audit leading to the dragon seeds. So might that be what Daemon's first thought is? How do we get the maximum number of dragons to go and attack King's Landing? Well, we've got a whole load of dragons over here. Let's try and figure out what we've got. It doesn't seem to be he's trying to sing to Caraxes, because why would he have to do that unless Caraxes is really angry about something? He shouldn't have to sing to his own dragon to soothe it. Let's go to a question from Diego Godoy saying, "Hola, Robert. Hola. Do you think that the dragon fight over Storm's End, which is presumably how this episode finishes, is the right place to end the season? Would it maybe have been better to end it with the death of Viserys? I mean, episode 8 was so powerful and moving that to me that would have been a great ending for season 1. Well, this is one of the things that people in the chat suggesting that it was Vermithor that maybe Daemon was going to sing to. Yeah, I think you may well be right, actually, thinking about that. But in terms of whether they should have ended it after season 8, I mean, I can sort of understand it. With Game of Thrones, if we go back to the Game of Thrones show, they had I thought it was a really good tradition of the penultimate episode of the season being the real epic one that you remember, the one where you have the culmination of lots of different plot lines, the one where for example, this is where Ned Stark was beheaded. This is where you get the Red Wedding, I think, was a penultimate episode. We get a lot of the big battles. Well, the Battle of the Bastards, penultimate episode, I think. So the big episodes were often the penultimate one. And that left the final episode of the season to be sort of setting up what happens in the next season. So tying up any other loose ends and then just sort of like leaving the characters on the right way to where they're going to go. So Arya getting on a boat to go to Bravos, that kind of thing. Now, if they were trying to do that, then I think that they made episode 8 here. If they're trying to do that here, they made episode 8 the big dramatic moment. And where they were wanting to end this season will have been when war is inevitable. That's my take. That's where I've thought from the beginning. That's where they were wanting season 1 to be, leading up to the point where war is inevitable. Now, could they have done all of the things after Viserys' death in one episode? I suppose they could have done. They could have squashed everything down. But they clearly decided what they wanted to do was focus in on Team Green for that episode and perhaps Team Black more in this episode. So I think they're just following the same kind of trajectory that they had before. I'm okay with the ending with the battle over Shipbreaker, or the fight over Shipbreaker Bay. As I've said many a time, I had no idea how they will end this, and we'll find this out. But I've said from very the beginning, I think they will end with some equivalent of the moody look across Blackwater Bay to King's Landing from Daemon and Rhaenyra, thinking this is now war. I think that's where they want to leave us at the end of this season. We've had all of this long build-up, and you get people trying to prevent war. I mean, in the last episode, Alicent was trying to stop war. Rhaenys, in her own way, was trying to stop war. She could have burned all those greens, but she didn't. And at least part of that is just, I think she just didn't want to kill her family. So there are options for this to go to all-out war, and there are people who are trying to pull it back. I think at the end of episode 10, we will be very clear in our minds, there's no turning back now. This is war. The only way this is going to end is if one side or the other gets defeated, or both, put it that way. Alexander Brown saying, I found Rhaenys crashing through the floor with her dragon pretty awesome as a penultimate ending. Yeah, I mean, I liked it too. That was, interestingly, for those who haven't read the book, that was not in the book. That was a new thing for the show. So I wasn't expecting it. I thought, whoa, okay. When she went down there, and I thought, oh, okay, so a dragon is clearly going to be making an appearance. But I thought that they did that really well. Luna Cascade saying, patron question, can you discuss how being a second son affects these individuals, Aemond, Larys, Daemon, and Jacaerys? So being a second son is something that George R. Martin thinks about a lot. It's something that he has a lot of his most interesting characters as being second sons. We get, for example, Tyrion, who is a second son, and he is there all the time being this person who's struggling to find his role. I mean, there's the whole extra layer, obviously, with his father's attitude towards him, but this struggling to find a role as a second son. You are not the heir. You are not the person who is being trained up to take over the kingdom, the rulership, or wherever. So you have to carve your own role in a way. He does that with Bran, incidentally, in the first couple of books. He makes a lot of this idea that Bran is Robb is the real king, and Bran is having to learn a whole load of these skills, but really it's just well, where am I going to end up? I mean, probably I will have some small patch of land somewhere. Maybe I'll get married off to somebody. That probably not now. I've lost the use of my legs, whatever. And then comes up this idea, maybe the magic thing. So that's the second son branching off, pun intended, with Bran, branching off to do their own thing. So that is where we get all of that. And Laris is interested. That we're going to get more on Laris, I'm absolutely sure. Yes, he comes across as being seedy, creepy, all of those things. I think we're going to get a bit more probably in season 2 about where he's coming from and why. Question from the King's Road saying, "G'day, Robert. G'day. It seems likely we will see our first dragon versus dragon scene today. So let's talk dragon stats. Would Vagar be faster than small dragons? How much bigger is Vagar than Vermithor? Do you think we will see someone trying to claim the cannibal? Will he be bigger than Vagar? Thanks for a fantastic season of coverage. I look forward to the return of live streams covering different parts of the world of A Song of Ice and Fire as we wait for the next season of House of the Dragon." Yeah, just picking up on that last bit, I will obviously be carrying on with these live streams. I'm going to be doing one more. I think next Sunday I'll do another Sunday live stream as a sort of a roundup for the whole season. Then I shall be keeping to my normal Thursday live streams, and they will they'll be on different subjects. We will definitely still be doing some Lord of the Rings ones, but we will also be doing George R. R. Martin's world. I would love to know, I mean, drop it in the chat if you're watching this live, what kind of videos what kind of live stream topics you'd love over the course of the next 18 months or so until we get the next season of House of the Dragon. Previously, I've gone through characters, I've gone through parts of the world, I've gone through subjects. So just let me know. I will probably go to my patrons as well, just try and get a steer from them. But if you're watching this live in the chat, do let me know. In fact, if you're watching it back later, let me know in the comments below as well. Any Miles Keela, welcome to the members club here. And going to your questions, Kings Road, about dragons, would Vagar be faster than smaller dragons? Well, interestingly, no. So Vagar, we know, is the biggest, the toughest, the most dangerous dragon we have. But George R. R. Martin makes it clear, actually, with regard to this very specific issue about the fight above Shipbreaker Bay, is that if the air had been clear, if there'd not been a storm at the time, then Arax the dragon was faster. Being smaller, lighter, would have just zipped away and not a problem. Faster than Vagar. So it does seem to come at a sort of a, you get older as a dragon, you get bigger, you get better at fighting, your flames get hotter, all of those other good things, but you do lose a little bit of your speed. So that seems to be the trade-off. And it was incidentally, I've no idea what will be on the show, but in the books, what the issue is that there was a storm, and Arax, which is a young dragon with a young inexperienced rider, found it really hard in the stormy weather, whereas Vagar, massive, old, experienced, didn't. So that was the issue. It wasn't a matter of speed. So the younger dragons can be more agile and they can be faster than the older dragons. How much bigger is Vagar than Vermithor? We don't know, is the short answer to that one, I'm afraid. So Vagar is bigger, but Vermithor and is a lot older, decades older, but Vermithor is also an old dragon by this point. So we're not told, it's this many meters long or this many meters high, anything like that. That's not how George R. R. Martin rolls with this, but we're just told that Vagar is easily the biggest. It's not maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Vagar is easily bigger. But I hope what we will see with these dragons, and one of the things that George R. R. Martin was very keen for this to be the case, particularly as this is the Dance of the Dragons, is for the dragons to be very clearly different. So you should be able to see in this episode coming up, this isn't an equal fight of two dragons against each other. Vagar is massive. We saw how big Vagar is. Arax is not. And that should play into the tactical and strategic discussions that happen in this episode and going forward for the rest of the show, which is, how do you gauge who's actually got the advantage? Because yes, having allies and having troops on the ground is big and it's important, but as we all know, it's about the dragons. If you've got dragons, then you'll win. They only needed 3 dragons to take the entire continent to start with. There's a lot more of that now. So we should see different types of dragons, and we should be seeing the two sides weighing up who's winning in terms of the dragons. Team Green don't have as many dragons, but they have got Vagar. Team Black have got more dragons, but they don't have all of the dragon riders, and some of the dragons that they do have are very small, and they've got very young and inexperienced dragon riders. So the balance should be quite tight to start with. And the way that the Civil War develops is that at no point do we ever get one side having an overwhelming advantage in terms of dragons. Whenever you think one side does, then things happen which shift the balance once more. So it's not just a matter of how many dragons, it's a matter of how old they are and how experienced riders they have. Will we see someone trying to claim the Cannibal, and will he be bigger than Vagar? Now, this is interesting. So Cannibal's a dragon we haven't seen yet. And frankly, we don't really see Cannibal in the book either. Cannibal is a dragon who lives on Dragonstone, hides in a cave somewhere. It's called Cannibal because allegedly kills and eats other dragons. Is incredibly vicious. And when they do try and they get the dragon seeds, trying to match up people with dragons to get more dragon riders, we do hear of some people trying to bond with Cannibal, and no one succeeds. So I think we will probably see a little. This is a season 2 thing. We will probably see a few people entering the cave. I don't think we even need to see the whole of Cannibal. We can just see them going in, puff of smoke, some fire billowing out, and we know what's happened. So how old is Cannibal? We do not know. Fire and Blood is very vague on that. There are different reports. Cannibal has definitely been there for a long time. Was it there when the invasion happened? Possibly. Was it there even before the Targaryens arrived there in the first place? Again, it seems unlikely, but possibly. But Cannibal does seem to be one of only a couple of dragons that we know of who dies of old age. So Balerion being the other. So does seem to be quite old. The implication is that Cannibal must be quite large. And because Cannibal doesn't come out much, that certainly seems to imply quite old, quite sleepy. And I don't know, bigger than Vagar, possibly, is all we can say for that. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Morrison saying live stream subjects I'd enjoy: the Summer Isles, Yeti. What happens to magic now? Now there are more dragons. Does Arya Stark go to Dawn? Okay, yeah, all interesting. Ezekiel Barara saying Marvel live streams. I'm not really an expert on Marvel. I mean, I enjoy Marvel movies, but I'm not really an expert. So probably won't be branching out to that in the near future. Naaman Targaryen saying Cannibal is up there with the size of Vagar and Vermithor. Yeah, well, I think probably yes, but we do not know. Callie Summers saying, I think Vhagar would win a race across the narrow sea, but the little ones win the sprints and are more agile. Yeah, I did have a quote, incidentally. I don't know whether I've still got it up here. Probably not. But let's see whether I can find it where... here we go. Here's a quote from Fire and Blood, just for those who are wondering. This is comparing Arax and Vhagar, and this is what we're probably going to be seeing in the show this episode. And says it was bad weather for flying, even for a dragon, and Arax was struggling to stay aloft when Prince Aemond mounted Vhagar and went after him. Had the sky been calm, Prince Lucerys might have been able to outfly his pursuer, for Arax was younger and swifter. So that's what George R. R. Martin says, or that's what it says in Fire and Blood, is that Arax was younger and swifter. So possibly over long distances, you say, across the narrow sea or something like that, maybe we would get Vhagar winning, but certainly over shorter distances, and certainly getting as far as, say, Dragonstone, then Arax would have been faster than Vhagar. Andrew Kay saying Melis was one of the best all-round dragons for combat, size, experience, and speed. Yes, absolutely. Mike Boy saying cross-character parallels as a suggestion for topics to be doing. Monica Jurakai saying... or mispronounced that, I do apologize, saying live streams on Targaryen history in detail would be great, each on a different era or ruler. Yeah, that's something I've definitely thought about. Brienne's fat sister saying, I would like to hear your analysis on how House of the Dragon added to or altered ideas about the main series. Yes, definitely. That's the kind of thing I would be doing. Jay Sheth saying deep dives. Yep, very happy to. What if videos? Interesting. Yep, maybe I'll do. I mean, I always find what ifs that they can branch out in a million different ways. So I tend to stick away from. I have done a few what ifs, but they're not sort of a staple for me. Yep, I think that's it. I've caught up on the chat. So, but we're sort of coming up for nearly an hour. So I would say, moderators, thank you. You're doing a fantastic job in the chat already. If you are watching this live, if you are in the chat, could you please give a little bit of love to the moderators? A little plug again, also, if you are enjoying the show, if you're enjoying this live stream, if you have been enjoying the live streams through the season, the way I'm asking you to show your appreciation is by donating to Alzheimer's Care and Research. There is a link on somewhere on your screen right now, and that's the same if you're watching this live, or if you're watching this back a little bit later, it should be there. So if you can afford it, I would hugely appreciate it. And patrons, thank you so much. I cannot do what I do without your support. So that's why I frame these live streams around questions from my patrons, and thank you. But let's go back to some questions from my patrons. Emma Scheiman saying, hi, Robert. I can't believe we're at the end of the season already. I have a few questions about Rhaenys and Melis today. First off, what did you think of the changes to Aegon II's coronation? The visuals were epic, but it was definitely a big change from Fire and Blood. I also noticed in your breakdown of the last episode that you didn't connect this scene to Helena's Beast Beneath the Boards prophecy, as many other theorists did. Do you think the beast could have been Melis, or are you still thinking this prophecy is about blood and cheese? And finally, do you think this change to the coronation screen will have implications further down the line, or can the story still proceed more or less in line with Fire and Blood? Okay, a few questions there around the same issue. In terms of the Helena's prophecy, I'm doing a video at the moment. This is going to be another one of those collaborations I do with Aziz from History of Westeros, coming out at some point, probably in a couple of days' time, about Helena and the Dragon Dreams. So if you want the full detail about that, do keep an eye out for that. I did I did include in my breakdown video the fact that I thought this was probably covering two things. First of all, looking forward to Blood and Cheese, and secondly, a reference to what was happening or what would happen there with Melis in the Dragon Pit. Now, I think I included that in the video, but maybe not in the text I put out there for patrons. So apologies. Sometimes I make a few tweaks a little bit during the process. So apologies if that didn't come through. But yes, that's what my take is that Helena sees things which, as with all good prophecies, can be interpreted in a number of different ways. And I think that's deliberate. I think that this is the kind of thing that perhaps casual viewers will go, well, clearly that's what Helena was talking about. But those who've read the book will go, oh, but there's something else as well. They're teeing this up for what will happen with Blood and Cheese. I think the thing which is quite intriguing is that Beast Beneath the Boards is that the Dragon Pit didn't really have boards. That would look like it was a stone floor. So technically, that probably wasn't that. Technically, it's something else, but we'll have to wait and see. So I think this prophecy is applicable to more than one thing. In terms of overall, did I like the change? I think I did. Actually, it's one of those things where I thought the spectacle was amazing. I really enjoyed it. I think I will have to sort of work through over some time what this means for the character of Rhaenys, because that for me is the key thing. I think it worked plot-wise. It worked absolutely fine. They had to constrict everything in order if they were going to tell the story in the way that they seem to be wanting to tell the story. So having the Vaemond thing happening the night before and having Viserys giving her effectively the power to decide whether he lives or dies, it works perfectly for me that she then decided to sort of stand vigil over the body. I think that was really good. I think that was a nice touch. Once you've done that, it also makes sense that perhaps she wasn't on the first boat out of there. She came in by dragon. She was going to fly her dragon out again. So maybe she is left there in King's Landing again. That kind of works. The logic flows if they've made those changes. And this is what good showrunners and good writers should do: is say, okay, so what are the logical consequences of the changes that we have had to make? And so that works. The idea that she got pushed along with the throng into the Dragon Pit, yeah, again, I'm happy with that. And then, of course, she would use that as an opportunity to escape. The key thing here is what she does then when she bursts up, and she could have Dracarys them. Now, I hope we get some more of this in this episode. So a little bit more of a hint, because Rhaenys, we've still not heard completely where she's coming from. She went into, if you remember, episode 8 with this feeling or belief that Rhaenyra and Daemon murdered her son. So she's not actually really 100% on their side. But she made the decision that she did, sticking by what her husband had said, and also perhaps because she wanted to stick by Rhaenyra as being the heir because of what happened to her. But we haven't unpacked that yet. So then we get her decision not to kill them all. I think it looks to me it's because she's a good person. She doesn't know there's about to be a civil war. She doesn't know that she could save all of those deaths by doing something there. It's just, what does she do in that moment in time? If she had just come up there and just burned everybody, then I think we would probably quite reasonably say that's a little bit over the top. It's also noticeable that almost certainly quite a few of the small folk died, and nobody mentioned it there. Does she feel bad about that? she certainly didn't seem to at the time. Maybe we'll find out more. So I think it's how she reacts to all of this, where she ends up with all of this. That's whether I will think that this was a good change or not. But in any event, I think it looked great, and I think it flowed logically from what they'd already said. Caius Ballerina saying, why do you think the Rainey scene is so controversial within the fandom? And are you going to watch Doctor Who tonight? Well, on the latter point, yeah, it's actually already aired in the UK, but I will be watching that tomorrow, I think. So yeah, no spoilers from me on that one, please. But that's for those who are not Doctor Who fans. This is a regeneration episode, which is always a big moment for Doctor Who fans. So we see the end of one Doctor and the start, presumably, of the next one as well. But in terms of why that scene was controversial, I think it's because it's the first big change that book readers, casual book readers, I mean. So we've had a lot of slight changes in timing. We've had a few changes in characters being aged up or down. We've had some changes in character. We've had a few things like with Lara Strong, which are new inventions. But this is the first time that this definitely couldn't have happened in the book world, because it would have been mentioned. The other things that were there, did Damon actually kill his first wife? Who actually caused the fire at Harrenhal? What we've had on the show are possible answers to what that was. It's just that we can imagine that the writer of Fire and Blood did not know the real truth, so just had a few ideas from people and then reported on those ideas, but actually it was that. This is categorically not book canon. This did not happen in the book. There is no way that we could have had Mellie's coming up and disturbing the middle of the coronation with Rhaenys on her back and that not get mentioned. So this is a change. So that's, I think, why it was controversial, is that you can't go around and say, well, maybe it did happen like that in the book. They just didn't report it. This isn't an actual change. And I think a lot of people do get into this kind of mindset of she should have killed them and that would have prevented the war. But I think her mindset, she didn't know there was going to be a war. In fact, the last conversation she had with Alicent was all about how can we prevent there being a war. So I think that bit makes sense. It's the fact that this was clearly and unambiguously a change. Nigel Thornbury saying she squished the people. Yes, she did. I don't think there's anything. And in a way, this is quite George R. R. Martin, is that we didn't have to have it highlighted to us, but we again remember we're hearing the story of the 1%. We're hearing the story of the rulers of this land, and there are even characters like Rhaenys, who comes across as being probably she would have been a really good ruler, but as far as we can tell, she doesn't care that she just killed a whole load of people. Her life is more important. Her escaping is more important than the lives of what may well have been hundreds of people who she killed there. So this is a very George R. R. Martin thing, is that the small folk suffer, and we're not even told all of their suffering because we're being told the story of the people who are ruling the land. Georgiev saying, hello, long-time viewer catching the live stream for the first time. Just want to say thanks for the content. You are very welcome indeed, and welcome. Alexandra Brown, I just spotted. I can't catch everybody's donations, but thank you so much for those who have been donating. Thank you very much for your donation. That's very kind. Quick flick through. Alicent with half-foot feet. A lot of people are wondering whether the story might be different if she had hobbit feet. Perhaps. Kieran Grant saying the dragon pit did get destroyed, not at this point in the story. Coboston82 saying Otto is a great schemer, basically Tywin vibes, which make him very interesting. Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew K saying Death of Innocence doesn't work for me with Rhaenys's character, but I think the show wanted to show a merciful side with the other faction. Yeah, so I mean, this is one of those things that you can argue either way, is that they tried to show her as being merciful, but we can see that there's another layer to this, of that her actually, in her act of mercy, killing a whole load of innocent people. So yeah, this is quite layered. So in terms of Emma Sherman ending your questions about this, you said, will it have implications further down the line, or can the story still proceed more or less in line with Fire and Blood? I think it can proceed more or less in line with Fire and Blood. The biggest actual difference is because this didn't change the coronation. He was crowned. And if anything, it will make the small folk think, well, that Rhaenys isn't very nice, is she? She came up and killed a whole load of people. But the biggest difference will be she will now go to the Team Black and tell them. So they will find out straight away. And that cuts out this period where, I mean, they've sort of cut it out already by having the coronation pretty much straight away, but it cuts out the period where Team Green were doing a whole load of things behind the scenes. We're going straight into the action, and then both sides are immediately going to be trying to figure out what to do. So it'll be interesting to see whether we get what happened in the book was sort of an exchange of ravens. They sent Maester sort of going across to and fro to pass messages to say, you can here's some generous terms if you just bend the knee to our person. And then they say, no, we refuse those, but if you bend the knee to us, then we'll let you off. So I wonder, they might just get rid of all of that and just go straight into what happens at Storm's End. So because Rhaenys has gone straight away and told them straight away, and they have to do something, they will have to do something about that, the Greens. Question from 444 saying, as we approached the end of the season, I wonder which source House of the Dragon followed the most and which one the least, Monken, Mushroom, Eustace, or reject them all for original narration. If and on that, I think they did. I mean, I don't think it's the right way of saying that they rejected them all for original narration or new story. I think that they showed a slightly different side to these things, which is a different story, which is there, but sometimes it's hinted at more than told. So I think it's probably fair to say a lot of Mushroom stories aren't true in show world. When we get Monken and Eustace, a lot of the boring bits are true, like roughly who's there in the Green Council, what they were discussing, what the plans were, that kind of thing. But they've just added an extra layer, which is fair, because when they were going back to Game of Thrones, season 1 of Game of Thrones was an entire book, and a big book, which they adapted for almost scene for scene, not exactly, but almost scene for scene for a whole season. Here, we've got just basically one chapter of a book, which they've adapted into a whole season. So, and a much longer season as well. The episodes are much longer than they were in season 1 of Game of Thrones. So they've had to add layers in, and that means that some of the stories that we had from these characters, these sources, like Mushroom and Monken and people like that, they perhaps don't tell the whole story in show canon anyway. If HBO 444 carries on, if HBO ever decide to make a TV special or miniseries set during the 10 years jump, what storylines would you like to see in it? I would love to see what exactly happened to Kristen Cole in the aftermath of Joffrey Lonmouth's death, the relationship between all three Strongs and the royal family, finally the relationship between Laena and Daemon. Yeah, so I mean, I don't think they will do anything in that time gap. But yeah, there are some things I would love to see. I think the Daemon Laena relationship absolutely it boiled down to 3 scenes, which isn't enough. And I think Laena as a character didn't get for me didn't get a big enough showing. What I'm looking forward to is somewhere along the line we're going to get the deleted scenes, and the deleted scenes are, from what I've heard, deleted not because they weren't good, but simply because when they edited it all together, they felt that this perhaps disrupted the flow of an episode, or perhaps distracted away from a later scene. What I mean by that is we get Laena. Apparently, there is a deleted scene of Laena claiming Vhagar, which I would have loved to see. That would be fantastic. It would show us a bit about her, and it would be, I think, quite an epic scene. However, they decided not to include that, and I suspect the reason is that they wanted it when Aemond claimed Vhagar. They thought, well, if we've already seen someone else claim Vhagar, then this might, get away a few of the feelings of concern. Is this even possible? This is a huge dragon. Can somebody just climb up there and claim them? If we've already seen it happen, that would perhaps take away from that scene. So I can sort of understand why it's not there, but apparently we are going to see that there. Well, apparently that is in one of the deleted scenes. There's also one with Alicent and Rhaenyra, when Rhaenyra is preparing Alicent for her wedding to Viserys way back in episode 2 or 3, and that will be fascinating because that's a shift in dynamic between the two of them. They didn't include that, so there are a few scenes that I hope we will get to see somehow. In the old days, these would be DVD extras, I'm sure they will be DVD extras, but I wonder whether we might get them as sort of bonus material that comes out on HBO Max or something like that. I'm not sure, but hopefully we will see them. But I think the Strongs, yes, that's something which we missed a bit of, the development that we missed 10 years of Lionel Strong being Hand of the King. So it felt almost as if he's straight away dying, which is not how it should have been. He should have been there for a good long period, being the Hand of the King, showing he's a trusted advisor. And we should have had 10 years of Larys there slowly building up his network. So I would have liked to see that. I would also have liked to see the Harwin, Rhaenyra, and their family dynamic a bit more. We had one scene which I thought was really good, really just showed a lot of what was unspoken, but we didn't see. I mean, we saw her being carried out over his shoulder, and then next time we see them, they've got kids and a very happy little family that they can't tell anyone about. So what happened to that? But I would love to see that. The thing is, the truth is that those kinds of things are great for character building, but probably wouldn't be good for actually a TV show when they're trying to be slowly ratcheting up the tension leading towards civil war. Simon Erickson saying Lionel and Harwin Strong were cool characters. Yep. Kieran Grant saying they could also make a couple of flashback episodes for next season. They could. I don't know the extent to which they would need to do that. The only thing I think, Larys, and trying to understand a bit about Larys, perhaps they might do a flashback, but I think the Harwin Strong plot now has, I think we've reached the point we know where we're at with it. I don't think that we need to go back anymore. So Dean Brown saying, I think we would all love to see everything but a 10-hour show is its own beast. Yeah, so it's a 10-hour everything, but a 10-hour show is its own beast. Yeah, so we shouldn't forget, I said it a little bit earlier, but these are very long episodes already. Most of them are over an hour. This is much bigger than typically Game of Thrones. They were 40-something minutes per episode, certainly in the early seasons. So this is 10 episodes, but then adding on another third of an episode for each, or even 50% extra. So this is the equivalent of 1.5 seasons. So there was a lot we had packed in here. If we've missed out on a few scenes here and there, I kind of understand it. Okay. Whitney, question from patron Whitney. Hi, Robert. I'm sad the season has come to a close, but as always, I know that you and other content creators will get us through this long night. What are you looking forward to most for next season? Well, I think it does depend on obviously what they include in it. I really am looking forward to when they get to the dragon seeds. Hopefully that should be next season. The attempts by people to be bonding to dragons. I think Nettles, I cannot wait to see Nettles. That should be fantastic. And Sheep Stealer, that should be a great storyline. The Adam and Alan of Hull and the Velaryon, or they become Velaryons later, that will be fascinating to see what happens with that. I'm also really looking forward to Alice Rivers, who should make an appearance this time. She won't be a main character, I wouldn't have thought, until season 3 probably, but we should see Alice Rivers, who is one of the most fascinating characters, I think, across the entire book. Magical, allegedly, but we don't know what powers exactly. And she survives to the end of Fire and Blood Part 1, so we don't even know what her end is. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I do wonder, I might be going to answering questions they've got a little bit later, but I do wonder whether this might be where we get a little bit more about how strong, or maybe even Laris, because Alice Rivers is based in Harrenhal. Now, Harrenhal will become important. It changes hands a few times. There are battles and things going on there. But Alice Rivers is this character who is at Harrenhal, and it's rumoured that she is a bastard from the Strongs. So she may well be, for example, Laris Strong's half-sister, who is magical. Does this mean that Laris himself could be magical? I know we've had Matt Joe Magician on a couple of times this season, who's got lots of great theories about maybe Laris is a green seer in some way. Maybe he can see through the weirwood trees. Maybe he could even walk into the rats or something like that. That becomes a whole lot less speculative if you say actually the Strongs have got magic running through them in some way, and if Alice Rivers is therefore, she is a bastard child maybe of Lionel Strong, that then adds in an extra layer as well, with the fact that he came down so strong with Harwin, with all of his bastard children, but if he had a bastard child, that adds an extra layer in there. So I can't wait to see what they're going to be doing with Alice Rivers. But also the dragons just generally. If we get more dragons and trying to understand a bit more about how dragons work, and I want a bit, if we can get it in some way, more of this kind of background information about the world. That's the kind of stuff that I love. Finally, for next season, I'm really looking forward to what happens in Winterfell. We're going to get Jace going up there. We get lots of different stories, and obviously, I say obviously, this isn't necessarily obvious, but Rhaenyra has been told this prophecy by Viserys. It's clearly still strong in her mind. She mentioned it to him pretty much on his deathbed. It's very clear there. So that's been passed on to her. She now thinks that she's the queen. So she will now be thinking, I need to pass this on to my heir. So at some point, presumably, she will need to tell Jace about this prophecy. And what if she tells him just before sending him up north? And the prophecy is, from the north, there's going to be this terrible winter and these baddies are coming. And then he gets sent up to Winterfell with fresh in his mind that he is the heir to this prophecy, and he is now going to go to the north and see what's going on there. And he will start encountering the Starks, who have, I have got a question about this later, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but he will be encountering the Starks, who have all this, the North remembers, and they've got all these legends and stories about the others. And so suddenly this will become not just this abstract, there's some bad thing coming from the north, but the Starks will have stories about what about the others, about the long night, and about legends about what if it happens again. So that will be absolutely fascinating if we can see how that interaction works. Lady Pushkins saying, hi Robert, I want to watch the season finale, but I also don't want to. The showmakers have done a stunning job of getting me invested in the show and all the characters. Please say something to make me feel better about all this tragedy. I can't other than to say the great thing I think I just have to say, this could have gone wrong. This could have gone badly. I am still hugely blown away by how the Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones fandom, has shifted completely in 6 months. 6 months ago, I think people were still rocking from season 8 of Game of Thrones, still very anxious. I lost count of the amount of people who say, well, I don't even know if I'm going to watch House of the Dragon because I've just I got burned by it, and I don't think I want to invest into that anymore. But as it got closer, as we got the trailers, and then as the show itself came out, and we saw quite how amazing this was, the turnaround of people falling back in love with this world has been absolutely amazing. So if I were to say one thing to make you feel happier, is this is so much better than it could have been, and it is amazing. And the fact we've got season 2 guaranteed, and almost certainly I think we will get other spin-offs now. This has been such a huge success for HBO. Surely we will be getting some more shows. So, and surely this is going, they've renewed it for season 2, but this will now we'll get the whole story. I'm absolutely sure about that. So that I think is the thing which has hopefully will make you feel a bit better about it ending. Do you think that Helena realizes what she is saying? Does she know that she's a dragon dreamer? Do you think she will have any visions of her or her children's future? Does she know what she's saying? It's not clear. So this is a show thing. There's no hint really in the books that she was a dragon dreamer. She was variously described in the book as sort of being simple, as being at least to start with quite a cheerful soul. The hints are that maybe she's neurodivergent, but that's obviously not the kind of wording that we would have in that world. So we don't actually know, and we don't really get to meet her much, to be honest, in the book. Here, they've fleshed this out a little bit more. They've made her a dreamer, and almost everything she's said so far has been prophetic in one way or another. Does she know it's prophetic? Well, I think that she will be starting, she gets the dreams, and I think she's starting to see them come true, which I think is going to add a whole extra layer of tragedy to this, because it's just a small thing, but you get in the background of that coronation, we're obviously looking at everything else at the time, but if you look in the back of that coronation, as Aegon's there, become king, holding up the sword and things like that, before we get Meleys coming up, everybody's sort of looking forward, but she's looking down. in the background. Go check it out. She's looking down because she knows what's about to happen. That tells me that she's aware of at least some of what she's saying. She's aware of the hints about what's going to happen. Now, if that's true, then that means that she may well start seeing things about that there's a lot of tragedy coming, and she will see a lot of it. If she sees some of Blood and Cheese beforehand, that's going to be horrific for her. And this will just add to the tragedy of Helena, I'm afraid, is that she will see the deaths, tragic deaths of all of those that she cares about before she experiences it. She will have to go through the pain twice. It's bad enough the fact that her children, over the course of a few years, her children will all die horrible deaths. Her siblings will die horrible deaths. She will die a horrible death. She's going to see all of these things twice. So that, I think, is probably enough to send anybody to a really, really quite dark place, which does map out to how we see her character in the book. So does she know? I think she does, but she is so caught up within this dream world that she cannot articulate it properly. And she is being set up as this Cassandra figure that is telling the truth, but nobody listens to her. Nobody pays any attention. Do I think she'll have visions of her or her children's future? Yes, I do. And I do wonder whether, I mean, this is the tragedy. I'm saying this always spoil my videos before they come out. The Helena video, which will be out in a couple of days' time, where this tragically leads to is hashtag book spoilers, but she dies during the dance, being found what looks like she jumped to her own death out of a window in the Red Keep. And in the book, there's these theories. Well, maybe she was just killed by somebody who might have wanted to kill her, and a few different ideas are thrown around. I just wonder whether she might actually have just been driven to it herself. Maybe this wasn't a murder. Maybe she had seen the deaths of all of the people she cares about in this world again and again and again, and she cannot escape it. And this is what happens with the Dragon Dreamers. You get in Duncan Egg, you get the character. He comes across as quite a funny character, but he's Diran the drunkard, and that's because he drinks, because he has to dull all of the dreams. He just can't take it. There's just too much going on for him. And I wonder whether that might be Helena. It just becomes too much for her. It will be tragic. I think her story is going to be the most affecting and tragic story we're going to get in the entirety of House of the Dragon. Meg Conroy saying Helena is the most innocent. Yeah, I think so. It's there. Jim A, apologies saying stop spoiling the story for those who haven't read the books. I say at the beginning of this live stream, my policy is book spoilers are fine. The book's been out for a while. Show spoilers are not fine. They're not sticking to everything that's in the book. So if you do not wish to have book spoilers, that's absolutely fine. This is not the live stream for you, though, I'm afraid. There are no show spoilers here, but there will be book spoilers. Philip PLC saying Damon could live, not impossible. I hope they don't make Damon live. I think that he should die. But he should die, I think, in this. Question from Creative Branches saying, ciao, Robert and Dan. Ciao back to you, Dan being my dog. What dragons have we not seen yet? Would you have shown other dragons by now if you were a showrunner? Helena has a big moment of Blood and Cheese soon. Do you think we will get more character development in this episode to set that up a bit? So in terms of the dragons, we haven't seen so far a lot of the smaller, the younger dragons. So Helena has a dragon, the Jace and Nuke have dragons, but also all of the dragons that are there hiding out on Dragonstone. We haven't seen them yet, so there are quite a few to come. I'm all right with that we haven't seen all of the dragons yet. I think this is fine. They're building up to it, and I think it will be great to be introduced to some of those other dragons in later season, well, in season 2 at least. So I'm okay with the slow reveal of dragons. It will mean, rather than having dragon overload now, when we do get, for example, 5-6 dragons in the same scene, which we will have a couple of times, presumably later on in the show, then that will be so much more impactful than if that's just an everyday occurrence here. So we did see, I think, 5 at once at Lena's funeral, which they were all just sort of like swirling around and things like that over Driftmark. So there are, we have seen a lot of dragons, but there are, probably only about half of them so far. In terms of, you asked about Helena, which I talked just now about, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail there. But do you think we will get more character development in this episode to set that up a bit? I just had this, just as I was preparing for this live stream, I had a completely random thought that I thought I'd just share as just an interesting other angle for where the showrunners seem to be going, is to often have things that we know are going to happen, but they're done by characters that we're not expecting. They're done for reasons that we're not expecting. I wonder whether Blood and Cheese is going to be as straightforward as we think. So we know, again, book spoilers, but we know what happens in the books. This is Damon commissions Mysaria to hire some people to do this. That's what happens in the books. But there's a very different dynamic on the show between Damon and Mysaria, in that she doesn't work for him in the way that she seemed to do in the book. She seems now to be very independent. She seems to have set herself up with her own spy network there in King's Landing, in Flea Bottom. And would she do something just because Damon asked her to? Probably not. But what we have is sort of a throwaway scene in the last episode that has to lead to something, which is, we got Laris Strong basically saying, oh, so Mysaria's set up this rival spy network. Do you want me to go and sort that out? And Alicent there, yes, this is in that really quite squirmy feet scene, but she's there going, I mean, if that's a thing you can do, then yeah, okay, if that's what you want to do. And then we get, it was only like 5-10 seconds, but we got a hooded character, presumably Laris, walking away from a burning building that looked as though that was the building that Mysaria was in. That is therefore a declaration of war from Team Green on Lady Misery. So what's she going to do? Well, she's already come out quite threatening towards Otto, it has to be said, saying that you forget how easy it is for princes, even kings, to die in King's Landing. Where might that go? What if she takes this as a provocation from Team Green? Team Green have, through Laris, have now personally attacked her in her own backyard, burned down her building, tried to murder her. She's already basically told Otto, I can kill a prince. And maybe, just maybe, we won't find out until season 2, so everyone will have forgotten I came up with this idea by then, and it's probably completely wide of the mark anyway, but maybe actually this is her just getting her own revenge. And maybe this isn't Team Black going in and doing a bloodthirsty murder just because for an eye kind of thing. Maybe someone like Damon, who seems to be a lot less bloodthirsty on the show compared to the book, isn't as involved as we think. It's just an idea, but it's just if we're thinking about different ways that they might be interpreting events, I think Blood and Cheese is absolutely right for that. It's just the kind of thing that they could have this is the story you know, but there's a little tweak on it here. Matty is saying, wasn't that one of Laris's fireflies instead of Laris himself? It could seem to Mosaria that Otto tried to kill her. Yeah, absolutely. So I couldn't see who it was in the murder hoodie. But whether it was Laris or whether it was one of Laris's lackeys, then I think that the point remains the same. Somebody attacked Mosaria, and she will probably be able to trace it back to Team Green. Melissa Blackwood saying he doesn't walk that easily. It wasn't him. Yeah, so he will have got somebody else to do it then. Let's go to a question from Zvibo saying, can't believe that this is the last episode of the season already. The wait for 2024 is going to be very long indeed. A couple of questions. First, I have to say that I struggled a bit with the Rhaenys scene in the last episode, in particular turning her into a mass murderer of the common folk. Not killing her family, meanwhile, seemed entirely fitting, especially not knowing what was to come. Having made this change, I really hope the show gives some consequence and weight to that, rather than just pretending it was of no lasting impact. How did you feel about the scene, and do you see a way in which they might tie things into the book events in the future? So, I mean, I've talked about this a little bit already, so Zvibo, I hope that you take the answers I've already given for this one. But in terms of the last bit that you were saying I hope the show gives some consequence and weight to it, rather than just pretending that it was of no lasting impact. The no lasting impact is interesting because she and the other side might think that there is no lasting impact. What it will say to the Greens, though, should be Rhaenys could have killed us but didn't. So Rhaenys, perhaps she's not as bloodthirsty as we might think. We shouldn't assume that because she's on the other side that she's going to be there immediately trying to kill her. Her motivations will be quite blurry for a lot of people. That should be one of the things which comes after this. Whether she does anything as a result is going to be quite interesting, because it's if she then gets to the point of thinking, you know what, maybe I should have killed Aegon, what's she going to do about that? So I agree. I hope they don't just ignore it. I hope that they then allow this to sort of play into both sides thinking, with the Greens thinking, well, Rhaenys isn't the kind of person to murder us, and her maybe thinking back, should I have done that? That would add an extra layer in that I would find fascinating. Mara Lee saying, if Rhaenys had used her dragon to kill everyone, how do you think that the Dance of the Dragons would have ended? Who would have ended up on the Iron Throne when it all was said and done? So, I mean, I think that the short answer, this is one of those what ifs, as I say, you can take in a number of different ways. But my take is that if she had just killed them all, then that's Team Green gone, and Rhaenyra would have been able to just claim the throne, and we wouldn't have had a Dance of the Dragons. So the question is, would people oppose? And some might do. The House Hightower might oppose. As it happens, they've got one Deeren, one of the Alicent's children is down there. Happened off camera. I don't think we even get a mention of him in so far anyway in this season, and he has got a dragon. So it's possible that they could try keeping going with the revolution, but then the balance of power would be so far in Rhaenyra's weight that I don't think there would be any way around this. That would, if she had killed the Greens at that point, then the dance would not have happened. That doesn't mean there will be no bloodshed, but it does mean that the horrendous civil war, which completely destroyed all of the basically all of the dragons, the vast majority of the dragons and the vast majority of the Targaryens themselves, would not have happened. Jonathan Giles is saying, don't forget that Aegon had 3 kids too. Yeah, I think they were all there. I might have. I didn't see all of the children there, but I think it's probably fair to say if you are going to be crowning Aegon king, then you try and make sure that his children are there to see it. So even if we didn't actually see them, I'd assumed that they were there. Leben Lenger saying, I think a big piece of the lasting impact of the Rhaenys appearance might be that the common people remember it as a thing that the blacks did, which will colour their perception of them later. Yeah, that's very possible. It also, thinking forward to something like the storming of the Dragon Pit, this will remind people of quite how dangerous dragons are, because the common people will realise that this was Rhaenys actually probably thinking to herself, I'm saving some lives and getting out of here, but actually the dragons themselves, the simply just having a dragon there is dangerous. And that's the kind of thing that you could start to use to whip people up into a frenzy against dragons as a whole. So it's not really, and that's when we get to the storming of the Dragon Pit, that is not just a we hate Team Black thing. That was the dragons as a whole are bad. And so this is probably a good starting point. We should be able to see a lot more of this kind of the dragons kill, cause a lot of mayhem. But a lot of the fighting in the Dance of the Dragons is dragons against other dragons. This was dragons hurting the people of King's Landing direct. So that's the kind of thing. When we get to the shepherd, when we get to the rabble rousing to get people worked up to that position where they may wish to do the storming of the Dragon Pit, I could certainly imagine. Yeah, remember when Rhaenys flew up on Meleys up out of the Dragon Pit, and all of those people died. Your father died. Your son died. Your wife died. Whatever, that kind of thing would be a good starting point. Zvibo saying, there seems to be some hints that the 10,000 ships and the Corlys Velaryon shows are no longer in production. I'm quite sad about both. Do you still think we might get an announcement about some projects being greenlit soon, now that House of the Dragon is coming to a close for now? And if so, which are you most hopeful for? Well, I've not heard any hints that they've dropped any of the 9 shows. So, if people have, I'd be very interested to see a link. Feel free to sort of drop a link somewhere. But for those who are unaware, what we've got is a lot of different shows in development. Obviously, we've got House of the Dragon, which is here with us now, but we've got, beyond that, 4 other live action shows which are in early development. So this is script writing, this is concept. They've not got onto casting, they're miles away from filming, but they're still trying to work up an idea that they can green light. The 4 things that we have are 10,000 Ships, which is the Nymeria story. They have, interestingly, they name check this in the show, in House of the Dragon, which, if you remember way back, you get Alicent and Rhaenyra. They were learning about Nymeria from that book. Then also we have an episode or so later, we had that, if you remember, when they're out in the Godswood by the Weirwood tree, and you have that guy playing the lute or whatever it was, and he was trying to sing a song, and that was a song about Nymeria. So the inclusion of those things did make me think they're still thinking they're wanting the audiences to know about this, just to have it in the back of their mind, so that if we have the show, then they'll have some kind of link across to it. The 9 Voyages, the Corlys Velaryon story, again, they have done some laying the groundwork in House of the Dragon. When you look at the main hall of Driftmark, you will actually see around the outside of it a whole load of trophies and things that have clearly been collected from Essos and further afield. These are the things that Corlys Velaryon brought back from his 9 voyages. So again, they've been trying to slowly tee up that. We've also got the Jon Snow show, which we don't really know where that's at, but that has been, although we only heard about it relatively recently, apparently that's been in the works for about as long as those other shows. And we've got Dunk and Egg, which again, it's early-ish development, but they're going to make that a season. The aim at the moment is to make a season per story for that. So those are the 4 live action ones. There are probably, we think, 4 other anime shows that are in early stages of development. The only one we have really told about there is this Yeetie one. We don't know any details other than the fact that it would be based in Yeetie. So that's what there is. All of these are in pre-production. I still think that surely some point soon we're going to get an announcement. If I were running HBO, I would use the finale today as the opportunity to announce that they've greenlit one or more of those shows, because this is when interest is going to be really high, when people then can start talking about that. So that's what they did with things like The Mandalorian. When The Mandalorian season 1 finished, they immediately announced, bang, 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 here's these other shows that we've got going on. There's the Boba Fett show, here's the Andor, here's this, here's that. They just announced all of them once they knew that that was a hit. So it would not surprise me if we get an announcement. Not heard about those 2 shows being dropped. George R. Martin is very clear. Not all of those shows will happen. It would be I say a miracle for most of them to go forward. That's not how this works. Even if they're trying to create a universe of George R. R. Martin Westeros type stories, not all of them will go forward. So if we get 3 or 4, I think we'll be lucky. Probably a couple of the anime, this would be my guess, a couple of anime and a couple of the live action shows. When? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But we're not going to see them, even if they greenlight something now. I can't see it. Something appearing, maybe an anime they could do a bit quicker, but I can't see something appearing before 2025. I'm afraid, because if they greenlit one of the live action ones, then they would have to, from there, even if they don't have a pilot and they go straight to a full year of filming, they're not going to. They have to do casting first, and then they have to be scouting out a whole load of places for all the filming. That process will probably take a year. Then you've got the filming, then you've got post-production. So I can't imagine it would happen after the next season of House of the Dragon, definitely. Andrew Case saying, with all the delving into and expanding the lore with Valyria on House of the Dragon, I really want the Valyrian concept rumors to heat up again. Yeah, this was one of the early ones that we had. We got told that they were thinking about the world of Old Valyria. That sort of got dropped, as far as I understand it. Anything Targaryen based, other than Dunk and Egg, which is its own thing, everything Targaryen based, the history of the Targaryens seems to be being wrapped up within the banner of House of the Dragon. That seems to be how they're doing this. Once they finish the Dance of the Dragons, they will tell a different story from Targaryen history, maybe Aegon's conquest, maybe something else, but still under the banner of House of the Dragon. Just having a quick flick through, see whether if anyone does know about these. No, I can't see anyone's dropped in a link that shows these other shows being dropped. But if you do know that, I would love to hear. Drop it down in the comments after the show. Just a Thraska just saying, to be honest, a show about some rando dude controlling a fleet of ships in a low fantasy setting might not be that crowd pulling. So the idea, I'm not doing a pitch for this, but I think this is where they're going to go with it. To start with, this is the Nine Voyages thing. This is Bruno Heller attached to this, who many people will know from things like Rome. So he's well established within the HBO world. I think he did The Mentalist as well, if I'm right. He's a good showrunner. And the idea is that this will be doing his voyages, which is not just him with a whole load of ships. It will have a feel, I suspect, of like Sinbad, heading off into the distant, unknown world, having adventures, and coming back with a whole load of treasure. That, and facing monsters and goodness knows what else along the way. So that's the kind of feel that I suspect that they will go with. And we know that he survives, and so that's not it's just the joy of and fun of the adventure along the way. That's the kind of feel I suspect that they will go with it. George R. R. Martin has said that these are going to be different in feel. He doesn't just want things that feel like Game of Thrones. And House of the Dragon, yes, it's slightly darker, but it is quite similar in style to Game of Thrones. He likes the idea of exploring different things. Maybe we'll have more of a romance feel in one. Maybe we'll have more of a comedy feel in another one. Maybe some are going to be lighter, some are going to be more tragic. He wants different feel for all these different stories. Obviously, something like Dunk and Egg would be a lot lighter, but I could certainly imagine Adventure on the High Seas as being a thing that they would go to with the Corlys Velaryon show. Luis Acevedo saying, I'm looking forward to E.T. The Golden Empire. Yeah, absolutely. The thing to note as well with all of these is that I talked about with House of the Dragon, they've taken, let's take a step back. With Game of Thrones, they started one book for one season. Now with House of the Dragon, it's about a third of a book for 4 seasons. When we start branching out, Dunk and Egg has obviously got its own stories, but when we start branching out into things like the 9 Voyages or Nymeria, we're talking just a few pages of text over however many seasons they're going. So the stories will be new, which opens up a completely a lot more potential to do different and perhaps radical things with the storylines. But also the fear is that this moves away from George R. R. Martin's writing and stories. So something like the Yi-Ti one, I'm really looking forward to it. But what do we actually have about Yi-Ti? We have a few pages describing Yi-Ti in the World of Ice and Fire, and that's pretty much it. We don't know any real characters. We know the names of some of the emperors and a couple of legends associated with them around the time of the Long Night. But if they're not going to be doing something around that, then this is going to be completely new. So some of these stories are going to be moving very much away from George R. R. Martin's writings. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just, I think, something to be aware of. Dylan Taylor saying Blackfire Rebellion series would be bonkers. I agree, it would be excellent. I think we have to wait for George R. R. Martin to write Fire and Blood Part 2, which will include the Blackfire Rebellions, before we get onto it. Although, of course, Dunk and Egg, if they go down the Dunk and Egg route, then we will see at least one of the Blackfire Rebellions in there. So my feeling with House of the Dragon is they got stung by Game of Thrones, what happened at the end, and they are very keen to stick to what George R. R. Martin has written with House of the Dragon. And so once they finish the Dance of the Dragons, if he's not written Fire and Blood Part 2, then I think we're going to get another story from within Fire and Blood Part 1, which is why Aegon's Conquest is the favourite for a lot of people. C. McBroom's saying, actually saw a report where the Yi-Ti and Sea Snoke and Nymeria shows weren't on the production schedule. HBO released a day or two ago. Not sure if they're still a go. Okay, so that's probably what, as Vibo was saying then, that's probably must be where this has come from. I can't comment on that. I'm afraid I've not seen that, so I don't know whether that is the case or not. So I will have a look at that, and perhaps next Sunday, if we've got an update, then I will try and give that to you. Let's go to a question from Beesman. Hi, Robert. Why didn't Otto recognize Mysaria? It's weird to me that he didn't comment on the White Worm being Damon's previous paramour. He saw her on the bridge in episode 2. Am I missing something? In every review video, people just say, and Otto finally met the White Worm or something similar without noting that. I guess he might not exactly remember her all these years later, but wouldn't it click for him at some point that she's the same Lysine woman? Excited for the last episode. Much love to you and the best mods on the internet. Yes, mods, much love to you. So, yeah, why didn't he recognize her? Did he recognize her? Well, the first thing to say is, if he didn't, I think that's perfectly understandable. It's not glaringly obvious because of the actor ages. They didn't age up some of those characters hugely, but this is in book timing about 23 years difference, and probably the only time Otto saw her was there for a couple of minutes on Dragonstone amidst all the smoke and stuff like that, and at least half of that he will have been focusing on the fact that there's a whopping great big dragon that's just landed behind him. So I kind of would forgive him for not. I mean, I can't remember things that happened 23 years ago, so I would forgive him for not recognizing her. But if he did, it's entirely possible he didn't mention it. So he said, so you must be the White Worm. Maybe in the back of his brain going, oh, actually, I think that's that person. But it will become obvious to him, I think, that she is no longer connected to Damon, because she has been based in King's Landing all of this time, and most of that intervening period, Damon was not. Damon has been off in Pentos with Lena, or on the Stepstones, or on Dragonstone. He's not actually been there with a long relationship with her, so he will not be thinking this is definitely somebody who is with Damon. But just because he didn't mention it doesn't mean he doesn't know. Maybe it will come up later. So, as I said, one of the things which, even if we don't go down this route that I've rather speculatively suggested, that maybe this might be the fight between the intelligence networks of King's Landing might be the cause of Blood and Cheese, even if we don't go down that route. We will definitely get Otto having to think about informants and how does he and who these people are, and this isn't the end of the story. Just because we didn't hear him mention it or talk about it this time doesn't mean he did not log it for later. Morally linked with this says, whose side is Lady Misery truly on? And what do you see her role moving forward into season 2 will be? So this is it's a mystery in the book, although she's not mentioned that much in the book. She's actually quite a minor character in the book, but she's definitely there. In the show, they've padded her out a bit. They've padded out a lot more about the nature of her relationship with Damon, even though it's clearly a little bit fuzzy and uncertain. But in the book, she was heavily implied to be in love with him and to work for him and do his dirty work in King's Landing. I think the show are taking it in a different route. I think she is now independent. I think that she may well still have some affection for Damon, but she also felt abandoned by him. He promised to keep her safe, and he has not, and he did not keep her safe. In fact, he abandoned her. So I think we're going to see that play out. Now, in the book, she effectively becomes spymaster to Rhaenyra when Rhaenyra comes into King's Landing. Now, that works if we get this battle of the spy networks. If we've got Larys up against her, she might think, actually, the best way for me to be combating Larys and the Greens is for me to ally myself with Rhaenyra and the Blacks. that may well be the way that this goes. And whereas she acts as a spy master, as the mistress of whisperers, she is actually still independent. She's just chosen for a time to side with one side there. So that I think is where we're going. She is going to be independent. She is going to, people may think that she's on their side, but she actually isn't. The intriguing thing will be the extent to which she or how she reacts to Damon when she sees him again. They did have that meeting when Damon got very drunk, and she seemed to at least care for him. She looked after him, gave him a bed for the night, but is that going to carry on? He's then headed off again for ages. Will that care continue? I suspect probably not. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Andrew Case saying, speaking of my area, I felt there was a clumsy... hang on, just disappeared there. I missed your comment. Your comments disappeared off my screen, Andrew. I do apologise. Oh, here we go. Clumsy part of episode 9 to see it was Cole and Aemond stumbling upon Mysaria and Otto. Should be painful. Yes, I mean, I don't know if the clumsy would be the word I would use. Again, this is a show only thing. That whole chase between the two sides to try and find Aegon first. So the fact that they stumbled across it, yeah, it's coincidental, and I don't want too many of those kind of things happening in the show, because this should be character driven, not just like here's a coincidence which leads to such and such. But it kind of also does leave us with this thought: if this is just a one-off coincidence that happened, I'm all right with that, because it does leave us with this thought that if they hadn't, then Otto would have got Aegon first, and everything would have been very, very different. Assassins would have been sent to try and kill Rhaenyra, and Aegon wouldn't have been crowned like that. The whole situation would be completely different. And I quite like, as a one-off, a chance thing. Actually, it feels quite likely that there should be a chance thing somewhere along the line leading to it. That does work for me. Mike Boy saying the illustrations in Fire and Blood make Sandok the Shadow white, though he's quite clearly described as black of skin and black of hair. Sandok the Shadow is definitely, as you say, black of skin and black of hair. I can't off the top of my head remember the picture of him in Fire and Blood. Flicking through... Ursula T saying, I love fantasy and George R. R. Martin uses it sparingly but rightly. Yeah, so as a show, I found this fascinating because the way that George R. R. Martin wrote A Song of Ice and Fire was to start out with this as being a high fantasy show, or high fantasy book series, but written as low fantasy. By which I mean, in book 1, you get zombies in the prologue. We get dragons in the last chapter, but the vast majority of the book, with leaving aside a little bit of Bran dreaming and a few hints about the direwolves, the vast majority of the book is low fantasy, no magic, nothing at all mysterious, and the characters that we're told to think of as wise and knowledgeable, like Tyrion and Maester, the guy from Winterfell. Always forget a name. You know who I'm talking about. They scoff at the idea of there being magic. They say that magic may well have once existed, but it doesn't any longer. So he writes it as this quite low fantasy, even though there is magic there. And I quite like in House of the Dragon how it's written still, or being shown, as low fantasy. Yes, there are dragons out there, but at the moment, that's the only... And there's a prophecy, but that's more of an heirloom, really, isn't it? At the moment, there's nothing much has happened for that. So there's not much magic. Maybe when we get to Alice Rivers and things like that, they will show us some magic, or maybe they'll just leave us as hints. Let's go to question from Mara Lee. The first season was about the prophecy regarding the need to have a Targaryen ruler unite the Seven Kingdoms and to defend the North from a great threat. The North will have to involve the Starks. How do you think the showrunners will do this? Did the Starks know something of this prophecy, since it will need to involve them? If so, how and when do you think they first heard of it, and how are they passing it down? The Targaryen rulers have that dagger. What do the Starks have? Will the Starks have an equivalent? And will this equivalent be the Horn of Winter or something else, some kind of weapon? So this comes down to a really interesting set of questions, because this comes down to one of the things that is sort of a mystery with this passing down the prophecy, which is that it seems to only be passed down one person to the next person. They're wanting nobody else to know about this. Only the king and the heir are allowed to know about this prophecy, which is curious, because if the king dies, then suddenly you're only one person dying away from the whole prophecy being forgotten. So you would have thought perhaps they might want to spread it out a little bit more, so more Targaryens are aware of this. I can't see any particular reason why they'd want to hide this as a prophecy. But where do the Starks come in? So one, I talked about Generation a little bit earlier with some of his theories. When he came on this channel near the beginning of the season, he was speculating that maybe when Aegon invaded in the first place, with this prophecy clear in his mind, and Torrhen Stark came, King Torrhen Stark, the king who knelt, met and spoke to Aegon. Maybe Aegon told him about this prophecy, and they came to some sort of an agreement. Torrhen would be spared, the Starks could remain in power, and they could keep guarding and protecting the North. I quite like that, but that doesn't quite fit in with this idea that the Targaryens aren't telling people. I like the idea that the North has got its own legends, it's got its own truths, it's got its own memories. The North remembers. The Starks are very clear and strong that the wall is there to protect the realms of men from a potential threat coming from the North. And if anything, this could have been a conversation between Torrhen Stark and Aegon the Conqueror, where Torrhen Stark says, oh yeah, so our role is really important because we need to protect the realms of men from the others who might be attacking from the north anytime. And Aegon goes, okay, I don't actually need to do anything here. Just leave these people here and they will do what they need to do. So the North remembers does have this kind of echo, though, of what we seem to have with the Targaryens. If the story or the need to prepare to be ready for this threat from the North is being passed down generation to generation to both families, but in ways that family will know and remember. With the Dragon Dreams, with the dagger, Valyrian steel dagger, and also with stories perhaps in the North. So what I mentioned a bit ago was how fascinating it would be if Jace is told, by the way, here's this prophecy by Rhaenyra, and then sends him up to the North. What if he starts hearing some of these stories while he's up there in Winterfell? What if he seals this pact of ice and fire, and the pact of ice and fire, which we hear about, which was this plan to be basically marrying the two families together, maybe it's not just a marriage pact to help out in the war. Maybe if it was something more important. Maybe it was a pact to kind of work together to be protecting the Seven Kingdoms, something closer to that. it would put Jace into a fascinating position, because he's in the book. Yeah, he goes off and does a reasonable diplomatic mission and comes back, and there are a few stories about what he may or may not have been up to while he was up there. But actually, this places him at the heart of the story if he is trying to tie together this prophecy that the Targaryens have with the prophecies that the Starks have. Catherine Furseth, I've got a couple more questions from my patrons now, and then I'll try and take as many questions from the chat as I can. So now's probably a good time, or some point in the next few minutes is a good time to drop any more questions in the chat. Catherine Furseth saying, "Hi Robert, I wonder what new, in your opinion, we have learned about dragons, dragon bonding, and dragon riders this season." From Viserys saying that dragons are a force that Targaryens should not have trifled with, and that control of them is an allusion to the relationships we've seen between riders and dragons, etc. Dragons being described as nuclear weapons, how much control do the riders have? Well, in terms of control, I don't think we've learned huge amounts new. We know that in the books, Dany climbs on Drogon, and Drogon flies off, and she's there, can't control him at all, even though she's clearly got a dragon bond with him. And she's there going, well, how did the ancient Valyrians do this? Well, they had magical horns that they could use, and they had whips and things like that. So she's just trying to figure out how might they do it. But clearly, although there is a bond between Daenerys and Drogon, it is not control that she has. So I think that message has come through here again. So I don't think that's new. I think we've got a lot of small things, like the visually you can see that they sort of put bits of metal to act as like a step into the dragons at a young age, that then the scales close around, and as they grow, the dragon rider can then use that to help them climb up onto the dragon. That was interesting to see. Also, the dragon keepers are interesting to see, with their speaking in High Valyrian. And this is different to what the dragon keepers, incidentally, in the book, who are more of a chivalric order, protectors of the dragons, as if dragons need protecting, but they're there to be guarding the dragon pit and the caves in Dragonstone from anybody who might be coming wanting to steal dragon eggs, things like that. Here they seem to be a lot more playing a proactive part in helping raise the dragons and helping with the bonding experience. We had that scene when Aemond was trying to bond with the dragon, didn't quite work. That was Dreamfire, incidentally, that Helena was going to bond with later. But they had a lot more of a proactive role there. We've got a lot more with the eggs that we didn't have information about before, them being lain in a clutch together. If you remember, Daemon sort of like broke open and all the goop was there and sort of pulled the eggs out. And I hope they make more of this, but there was a lot more of an emphasis placed on whose egg is this. When we are in A Song of Ice and Fire, we never really get speculation about whose egg might lead to which dragon. So Dany has 3 eggs. It doesn't really seem to cross anyone's mind which dragon's eggs might these be, but that does seem to be an issue in House of the Dragon, which is good, I think. The most fascinating things, in my view, though, are the hints that we get from Viserys about Old Valyria. Pardon me. In particular, he has this when he's describing Old Valyria itself, and he says the dragon riders had their homes in the side of the volcano for that to be closer to the source of their power, which is a fantastic line that we don't understand yet. So the dragon riders needed power themselves somehow. They got power. How do they get power from a volcano? Was it just that volcano, or does the same thing apply to somewhere like, say, Dragonstone? Why is it that being close gives them power? There are so many questions from that, but we have learned that there is a clear link between volcano, at least the volcano of Valyria, and Dragon Rider power, and there is such a thing as Dragon Rider power. So that is the an element that I hope we get expanded. Maybe we will get expanded on in some of the earlier bits of history for the Targaryens. The long form version of Targaryen history is that they lose knowledge and understanding of dragons as time goes by, as of course they do. The Dance of the Dragons is clearly where a lot of that knowledge goes, but they seem to have had more knowledge in the olden days that they kind of lost at going through. Maybe Aegon and his sisters will retain some of that information. They're only a couple of generations, 3 generations down from people who were in Valyria, so maybe they did pass on some of that information. Matthias saying, I saw people asking if the power came from the volcano or for something stored in the volcano. That's interesting. Yep. Emma Scheinman saying, do you think the dragons first came from the 14 Flames or the Shadow or somewhere else? Yeah, I think probably dragons or draconic beings started off in the far east. It was the Valyrians who created the dragon bonding, and that's why we associated them with Valyria. That's my take anyway. And last question from my patrons. This is from Lahiru Adinalankara, saying, Ayu Bao One, Robert. Mispronounced that, I'm sure. I apologize, but that means long life to you in Sri Lankan. Well, thank you very much, and the same back to you. Thanks for your videos. Hope to listen to you while cooking dinner. Do you think Alicent will ever know the full prophecy? Maybe at the end, or will she live out her life thinking she was correct? I think she probably will live out her life believing she was correct, if only because how could they possibly persuade her that that's not the case? So if they do, and they might have a conversation between Rhaenyra and Alicent, say at the end of season 2 or the beginning of season 3, and Rhaenyra says, well, why did you do it? I thought we'd reach an agreement. And Alicent says that he changed his mind on his deathbed, and he said that Aegon was to be his heir. And she goes, well, how does this conversation go? She then says, but what did he actually say? And she says, oh, it was a bit vague. It was all about Aegon and you must be the one, and prophecies and protection. And then does Rhaenyra then go, no, but that's a prophecy. That's nothing. He was talking about Aegon the Conqueror, not your Aegon. And would she even believe Rhaenyra at that point? I don't think she would necessarily, because that's the kind of, well, of course you'd say that, but you weren't there. I can't see that they will get, I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but I can't see how Alicent could get to a position where anybody could persuade her that she had misinterpreted what she heard, because there were no other witnesses. There was no one there to tell her exactly what it was. The only person possibly is Rhaenyra, but why should she believe Rhaenyra at this point? So, yeah, I think she's going to go to her death believing she was in the right, but hating it because of all the death and suffering that has been caused by this. She didn't want a civil war. I think that much has been made clear by the show. She tried to stop it. She tried to save Rhaenyra, but things will happen which will push the whole thing towards civil war regardless. Okay, so that's the questions from my patrons. Let's just have a quick flick through. Saying George Hutto saying Rhaenyra can prove it with the dagger. I don't know whether that would prove that that's what he was talking about at the time. It would prove that there is a prophecy, yes. Pouring out paint saying if Rhaenyra says Song of Ice and Fire, Alicent will go, oh, did he talk about the Song of Ice and Fire? I would have to look at that screen, that scene again. And this is what I love, by the way, is that my interpretation of these things, there will be people in the chat, there always are, who will have watched that and picked up on things I haven't. Yeah, if he said the Song of Ice and Fire, maybe she will make the connection there. Web Security saying, which season do you think the God's Eye battle happens in? I mean, my estimate now, if I had to say it, would be season 3, episode 9 or 10 would be where I would put it. If it's going to be 4 seasons long, that's where I think it naturally falls. Matthew asking who my favorite character and favorite dragon is so far. I mean, I don't know if I got a favorite. I think Caraxes as a dragon has been one of the most well-developed ones. Vagar, though, clearly is there. We haven't yet had all of the dragon personalities, so I'm not sure if I've got a favorite character yet. Going into this, in terms of characters, I was looking forward to Laris Strong, thinking that I would really love him as a sort of a Varys figure. But he's obviously turned out a little more seedy than that. So probably not him. I think I can't quite at the moment get past Paddy Considine's Viserys portrayal. I think that was so good. George Martin said it, so this isn't anything new from me, but it added an extra layer to that character without changing the heart of that character. I think some characters they've added extra layers to, and that has changed us, so we now see them slightly differently as well. And now I understand their motivation slightly different. I don't think that's what's happened so much with this version of Viserys. We've added to it, we've expanded it. It's a much more well-rounded character. So I love what's happened with Daemon, but also I now think of this Daemon. I mean, who knows? Maybe in later seasons or even in this next episode, then we will see a lot more of that horrible Daemon that is definitely there in the books. But Sophie, they've softened him quite a lot in the show. I think that he's come across really well, but it's quite different to my interpretation of the character in the books. Reflective Everything saying, so I'm not the only one frustrated sighing over Laris. I'll take it. No, you're not the only one frustrated there. Andrew K saying Considine was amazing, hard to name many better performances in a fantasy setting. Yeah, absolutely. Lady Pushkin saying maybe it was the prophecy that Mad King Aerys was thinking about when he said burn them all. He was probably very ill and confused. Yeah, so burn them all was, I mean, the exact quote, that's a show quote rather than a book quote. But yeah, that was certainly, it was a theory that I think I might have even done a video on it many years ago, that this was actually, he was having, maybe even Bran was invading his dreams and saying, you need to burn all of these White Walkers. So the idea that he was going mad because he was getting dragon dreams is a good theory. I think it's one that will probably, it's the kind of thing which will probably get a lot more work done on it in the Song of Ice and Fire community over the course of the next 18 months, 2 years, because I think this is where the big bits of reevaluating things will come with this prophecy. What does this mean if we've got more of these dragon dreams, if we've got a clear prophecy for a reason for the Targaryens being there? Who knows about it? How does this impact on their actions all the way through the Targaryen history? When did knowledge of it get lost? That kind of thing. I think we're going to see a lot of theories being developed. Emma Scheinman saying you definitely did do that video. I heard this theory on IDG. Well, yeah, it was a long time ago. Andrew Case saying from the trailer for episode 10, House of the Dragon seems to capture many images from the text and even the artwork many of us have seen. Yeah, I just want to give a little shout out to Mark Simonetti, the artist, who has done many of the bits of artwork in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire that we know best, that they have echoed in the visual landscape of House of the Dragon. For example, the picture of the Iron Throne, they have definitely tried to make it closer to that version of the Iron Throne that he has drawn. There was a great there's a still of Daemon with all the gold cloaks, which is almost a mirror image of one that he did, and there have been a few other, also Harrenhal, when we saw the Great Council of 101 looks almost exactly like a picture he did there. So I just want to do a little hat tip for that. I know, because I had a very brief Twitter conversation with him about that. He didn't get any sort of acknowledgement from the show or anything like that. So, but clearly there was some inspiration there. So I want to make sure that the artists get that. And there are so many fantastic artists out in this Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones community. So there is a lot of work to be for people to be building on. And I'm personally very glad that they are taking the visual landscape that we already have and then starting to put it out there on screen so that these things feel right, because this is how we've imagined them before. This, incidentally, if we're thinking about the Lord of the Rings films, a lot of the reason why they looked and felt very much like Middle-earth was because the visual landscape, we had John Howe was involved in that, who's this great Tolkien artist. And so he was then able to put what he's been drawing all this time over onto the screen so that can then feel a lot more like it. And that, I think, is what has happened with House of the Dragon, is they're taking the images that we have as the visual landscape, and that allows us to become immersed in it because it feels like home. Brian asking when Otto becomes a White Wizard. Not in this season, I don't think, anyway. I think with that, I think I'm going to start drawing this one to a close, because I should say this episode is coming out in just a couple of hours or so. I want to give people a moment to get their breath before watching that. I will be back on Thursday with an open Q&A. So if you'd like to join me, that's back with my usual live streams. I will be doing one more of these, a charity live stream as I wrap up next Sunday, as I wrap up to the season of House of the Dragon. Let's see whether we can get it up to $7,000 raised for Alzheimer's care and research. We've done really well. Thank you so much to anyone who's donated today. I think we got it up to 6,700, which is wonderful. That you can still donate if you've been watching this live stream all the way through to the end and wish to show your appreciation. That is how I would love you to show your appreciation. If you're watching this back a little bit later, appearing somewhere around here will be a link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here will be a link to my Patreon page. Patreon is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. But that's all for this time. I will see you again on Thursday for my next open Q&A live stream. And I will obviously be doing some wrap-up videos from the finale coming up later today. Take care, everyone. I will see you again soon.